Hi, everyone. Welcome to the season 3 finale of Mom Autism Money. Today, we're sitting down with one of your favorite guests, Paul Curley, to get the details of the Able Age Adjustment Act, which passed as a part of Secure 2.0 in December 2022. It's April, which is recognized as Autism Acceptance Month or Autism Awareness Month by some organizations. We talked about the difference in Season 2, Episode 1, with Lee Wiley-Mitski. Last week, we talked to Sara, and she led us on to another way to celebrate April by rebranding it as Autism Action Month. Joyce's idea of reaching out to autistic people and autistic families this month to provide direct support was absolutely spot on. For a lot of people listening, you are those families. So today, we're going to talk about other ways to take action during Autism Action Month and beyond. Ways you can engage in democracy and continue to make your financial life and the lives of your children better, not just now, but into the future. We are so excited that the Able Age Adjustment Act passed, but there's still a lot of work to do. And Paul teaches us some of the best areas to focus on as we interact with our legislators, regardless of political party. Before we get into it, I want to super encourage you to listen through to the outro today. We've got a pretty big announcement and we wouldn't want you to miss it. Without further ado, let's talk to Paul. Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for coming back to join us.
Thank you for the opportunity, Bren and Joyce.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
We are super excited to talk about the big thing that happened since the last time we spoke, Paul, and that is the Able Age Adjustment Act. And it passed. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what happened in December that it did pass and what the changes within that law mean.
First and foremost, thank you so much, Bren and Joyce, for the opportunity to really discuss the Able Age Adjustment Act. It has passed, and that is just such a game changer for any number of reasons. It's going to help a lot of more families. Before the change, that the age of onset in order to be eligible to open an Able account was 26 years old. And with that, there's roughly an estimated population of 8 million people that could open an account. And with the Able Age Adjustment Act, it's really changed that age of onset from 26 to 46 years old, and really just increased the number of eligible users, from that 8 million potential users to 15 million potential users. And it's really a number of important types of demographics. But one of the key points is 1 million veterans will now be able to use an Able account. So it's a critical change. I think we're all happy that it has finally passed, and we just need to wait until 2026 and when it is effective and implemented. But in the meantime, we're very excited about its passage.
Paul, I know you and I have talked about this off the podcast a little bit before, but I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit behind the logic of the delayed implementation. So this was something that was voted on in December 2022. And then, like you said, it goes into effect in 2026. Why wait 3 years? I think it has something to do with just helping the legislation pass and like federal budgets, but I'm wondering if you can help us understand that a little bit better.
First and foremost, I would just reiterate that I think we're all really excited that we're going to, help a lot more families. That Able, has been growing well, and with the expanded usage, we're going to help even more families, and that's exciting to focus on. But yes, behind the curtain, behind the closed doors, and in terms of just the legislation, in terms of its timing of passage, a lot of the way the things work in DC is just the scoring of bills, and what it means by scoring, it's like how much is the expected cost for this legislation to pass. It did come in originally at a pretty high score, so fairly expensive. And so one way to sort of tweak the numbers in order to get the score down and to allow for the passage, it was just pushing back the implementation date to 2026. There's this 10-year window that legislation in DC for federal government, they look at scoring. So broadly speaking, if the score is a 10-year window and you delay the passage 3 years, the scoring looks at 7 years instead of the full 10 years. And just because it is such an important critical legislation to pass that helps so many families, that I think everyone sort of allowed for this tweak. And so that's the perspective from the big picture, the legislation and the numbers, but there's also this behind the scenes sort of reporting element that does take place. So when you open up an Able account, that it is reported to the IRS and federal government, just to make sure that someone doesn't have multiple accounts, that it does kind of get reported up to the government. And then from there, that stepping stone process on the reporting side of it, that I just think that operational step probably delayed it. I think we're all sort of surprised for the delay. If anything, the positive is really that everyone will be on the same page, that everything will be fine, that we're all going to be excited for that launch. It will take time to raise awareness and understanding about ABLE, but also the age of onset with the ABLE age adjustment. So it's actually probably a good thing in certain contexts. I think we I think we all probably could have seen it being effective 2023, but with that 2026 passage date, there's the scoring element, and frankly, as we had said in past podcasts, it's really just great that ABLE has even passed. It was a 5-year road just to even get ABLE launched. That is part of the long-term roadmap of just looking at the hurdles, solving the issues like one by one. That the momentum will increase, and we could have waited much longer for the passage of ABLE to include this age, which was the original purpose of the bill and of ABLE accounts. But we're just happy that ABLE's live, that it is growing, that is in some instances starting smaller, so that when we get to that full launch in 2026, that we'll have the footwork down and things will be great. So.
No, absolutely. And I don't mean to discount what a huge deal it is that this past period, it's pretty massive. It's pretty massive. And government bureaucracy is always a little bit of a waiting game. One thing that I know we've talked about before is a lot of the people listening, they have kids who are disabled. So they obviously meet that under 26 burden. And one reason to care that the Able Age Adjustment Act passed, even if your child already qualified with the currently standing age requirements, it's just that it's good to care about other people, right? It's good that 6 million new people will be able to open these accounts and establish some financial freedom for themselves to save and potentially even invest. That's really, really exciting. I know one other pro that we mentioned with this is that with so many new people able to open ABLE accounts, with a larger user base, those fees are projected to come down when this does go into effect in a few years.
Agreed. It is, as more people are able to use a product and really use ABLE accounts, that the different types of fees will be able to come down, whether we're talking about monthly or quarterly fees. For example, like a number of states, even in the shorter runway that we've had about 5 or 6 years for many programs being open, that they have been decreasing the fees, whether it be the quarterly or the monthly fees, or just even the ongoing types of fees, asset-based fees. So it was part of the original sort of game plan to get the plans launched, and then over time, as the scale picks up and as the processes become larger scale, that the fees overall will decrease. That being said, the fees have been going towards just setting up the platforms, setting up the infrastructure. Many of these programs launched before there was even final regulations in place at the federal level saying that the product was even allowed. And so there was a walking on jello type of feeling, for some of these launches. What I would say is that there's been a number of planned launches that really, provided that full scale, launches with mobile apps and wallets, so being able to pay with Apple Pay and debit cards, and some of the programs are even launching Braille cards, pretty soon. There's been a couple of providers with online chat functionality, and so there's been a lot of the call center support, and so there's been a lot of the different programs, have been charging different fees to help with the launch. But as you said, as the scale grows and more users use it, it will broaden awareness and build trust as sort of more people use it. And by and large, it's just the continuation of the momentum for helping families.
Oh my gosh, definitely. And one thing, I'm excited for potential fee decreases in 2026. But I do want to let people know, at least here in Pennsylvania, and I know some other states recently too, these programs, like you said, are incredible for how young they are. I'm always impressed with the ease in which I can use the ABLE account. There's so many different ways that I can just access that money and utilize it in our day-to-day lives. And here in Pennsylvania, it wasn't a huge fee decrease, but I don't want people to be like, oh no, I have to wait till 2026 when it's cheaper to run an account, because a lot of these states are implementing fee decreases now. As these programs become larger and more efficient, you don't have to wait till 2026 to start saving.
Agreed. In many ways, opening an account is a vote that it was a good policy that was passed, that the legislators provided this product. It was heard that it was needed, and so they launched it. One intriguing fact, and of course, Brent, you know that I'm a director of savings research, a lot of data, but you know the brand new accounts that do open for Able, the average account balance is roughly $4,000, and it's a it's great to see the launch, but also to think about how $4,000 compares to the $2,000 account size that someone is allowed to have for federal benefits. So it's a great way to start saving and get that footwork down, especially if one wants to float higher than federal requirements of $2,000. And so it's a great time to open an account, especially if on that scale of getting it open, setting up the automatic contributions, and finding different ways to grow the account as well.
Absolutely. I know this is the question a lot of our listeners want to know. A big obstacle we've heard from people is they're afraid of Medicaid payback provisions. And so for some people, that prevents them from opening an account in the first place. Now, I'm not aware of any cases where these payback provisions have actually been implemented. It's not, we've talked at length before about how it's more of a fear than a justified reality. However, if we could get rid of them, that could get more people opening accounts because it removes the fear. And I guess what everyone's wondering is, are Medicaid payback provisions next? Is that the next federal legislation? And what do we kind of see in the pipes as far as that goes?
Great question. I do think that broadly speaking, that Medicare clawback provision is something that is in focus. Now that the Able Age Adjustment Act is implemented and in the pipeline, but I think that the Medicare clawback will be the next one in focus. There are a handful of states that already implemented, at the state level, but we're talking about the federal across all states type of legislation to pass. So I do think that becomes the next item of focus. That it is, as you said, just taking down one more hurdle, or just sort of, one more issue. That being said, you're absolutely right, where I'm not aware of any state that really has been enforcing that clawback provision. So to the extent that there is a sort of, soft understanding that it is less of a concern in reality, but I do think that the mental hurdles are where we kind of focus in next. And as we kind of pull from different, friends across the industry, it is interesting where Able accounts are a living account, not a dying account. Of course, Brian, whom pulling that insight from, but to the extent that for Able accounts, they are, it's an important account, and it does help those with disabilities from an outlook perspective. So there's the Medicare clawback provision. There's another focus around the increasing of contribution amounts, because a number of people become eligible to open an Able account with a certain type of incidence where there may be like an insurance payout. So increasing the annual contribution limits from 17,000 as of today, but that increasing the annual contribution limits, from that 17,000, which is a great number, but to the extent that there's 529 college savings side or education savings side, there's a 5-year contribution number that can be hit. So increasing either the annual limit to a 5-year limit, or even a much higher one, could be of interest. Another interesting, more legislative one is really the concept around permanence. There's there's currently the capabilities to roll over 529 assets over to Able, and then also the incremental increase in savings with Able to work. Those two types of components have passed, they're implemented, but they're not what's termed permanent. So there's the legislative permanency that was sort of like convert those two components, the rollover from 529 to Able and Able to work components, just to make them permanent and not move away over time. I do think that those are important components, not less of a concern, but I do think that it just shows the track record of continued support and growth of Able. I think the other focus is the flexibility around Able accounts, whether we're talking about having multiple accounts or being able to transfer one's own account to a spouse, or the concept around couples with disabilities. So to the extent that perhaps there is, just thinking of an example of if the age of onset related to a car crash and both the husband and wife became disabled, that having that flexibility to roll over assets from one person to the other. Another area of focus, especially in Pennsylvania and across the nation as well, is around employer contributions. A lot of the Secure 2.0 provisions, and it was a retirement-facing bill, what was around employer matching. We saw the student loan repayment pay down, but to the extent that employers can really help make contributions to able accounts is something that is being worked out. And there's a couple of different groups, such as the National Down Syndrome Society, that does have that one as a priority. So in terms of just different areas of prioritization are there. The last one is in broadly speaking over next 3 to 5 year roadmap and just laying the groundwork up to the 2026 and probably two years after is just building out those different types of collaborations and building awareness. Of course, there's SSA and HUD and US Treasury. Treasury would be more focused on getting IRS legislation and different components such as the permanency. But I do think that there's one example in the story that I really like to share is just working with the IRS. We had asked IRS to make a YouTube video on able accounts that they're launched and that they are live and a real product and able to be used. And lo and behold, the IRS did a 2-minute video. And if we think about the scale and number of viewers and just strength and confidence that the IRS provides to different things, that was another partnership. Another concept, being in the Philadelphia suburb area is just sort of like the concept's been, rolling up around the helping your helpers in terms of just raising awareness and understanding. And, for example, we had in my children's school, we had people come in and present about ABLE, and it was not the state of Pennsylvania. It was a lawyer and a state planner and an accountant. So just building out those networks of just, getting that message out there to families, to HUD, to IRS, to lawyers, to accountants and state planners, having the conversation. And from my take, it's, I'm always surprised about whenever I talk to my accountant that they're not aware of able accounts and they're not aware of 529 accounts. It's just another form, raising the awareness, but there's such an opportunity to get more people engaged and help get the message out there. And that's why we're excited about you, Brent and Joyce, and all the great work you do.
And you know what? That is super cool. It's so funny on our Pennsylvania state tax returns. If you're just looking at like the PA 40, which is like the state equivalent of the 1040, the line where you put your ABLE contributions to get that state tax deduction is literally just labeled like other deductions. And then you have to go dig into another schedule to find it. So it's always super interesting, like you were saying, with the accountants not always knowing about it. It's like, it's kind of hidden. You kind of have to dig for those deductions. And Joyce, I know you and I had talked about, I'm so excited about the estate attorney coming in to talk about ABLE accounts in the school. That's one thing we've talked about is just how great would it be if this information was in the places where we already find ourselves, in our schools, in our therapist's offices. So that's all really exciting.
Do you have any plans to, how I always go back to like teaching and people coming to school, like what's the plan to put ABLE accounts where 529 colleges? Like everybody seems to know what a 529 is, but not ABLE. So when are we going to get there? I always ask the same question, but when are we going to get there? Like I see states doing it, but what do you think it's needed for ABLE accounts to be as popular as 529, in your opinion?
One area that I'm excited about is really that there are certain states that are making those inroads. In Illinois, if a student has an IEP, they are automatically getting information about ABLE accounts, and that is incredible. That's a nice win for Illinois, and I think we're all sharing different success stories about what is raising awareness and understanding. I do think it does take time. I think about a story of someone in our area as well, where someone has 3 children, and the first child has a 529 account, and the second one, the child is born with a disability, and they roll it over to an ABLE account, and so from there, that they're hosting local programs in the community about ABLE accounts and raising that awareness. I see opportunities to get that grassroots up from the parent level up. And that is really how ABLE was first launched, around a kitchen table with 4 different families. I think that the schools in the states have the opportunity to make those different programs and inroads, whether it be for IEPs or just raising awareness around being in the community, whether it be in the community of hosting those educational pieces, or as did Illinois do with just part of a process of having IEP that the student gets it. I do think that there's a great opportunity for your team as well to raise awareness and understanding as well, Joyce and Bryn, and that's why I think that the work you do is great and it's critical, and that's why we always love helping out with the podcast and getting the awareness and understanding out there. I do think it does filter out to having these larger legislations, the Able Age Adjustment Act, as you said, Brenda, like what does this mean? I think about our ability to go to a Sharon Epperson for CNBC and present to her this family topic that we are talking about a product that with the change it'll go from 2.4% of Americans to 4.5% of Americans will now be eligible to open up an Able account. As the awareness grows and the ability to make an impact for families, so does the type of coverage that we'll get overall. I do think that there's an ease of use piece. I do think that the product providers themselves, have been implementing mobile apps and debit cards and the Braille cards and increasing online chat. But I do think it'll be a lot of that groundwork still needs to be continued. And from a parent listening to this podcast, reaching out to your legislators, whether it be the Senator Casey or that House level of the federal House, but also the state level legislation, there's just so much opportunity to raise awareness and opportunity for yourself, for Able, and to pass legislation that benefits you as well. We went through a number of different legislations that are front and center. And if there's one that really appeals to you, I think one of the misunderstood or underappreciated thing is that we're able to call up our state legislators, our federal level House, our senators, to really promote awareness of the issues that we have as a family, as a parent, to really express our beliefs of what's working, what's not, what do we need more of. And Able accounts are great, they're growing, they're doing well. And I guess it's a good time to at least footnote in that the automatic contributions coming into Able is $52 a week. So it's a great number that's helping a lot of families continue to grow and do well. I think that the average account balance is currently $9,000. So it's a very reasonable number, especially given that it's 6 years in for many of these programs. Able accounts are being used. One intriguing thing is that roughly 43% of the assets are in money markets and FDIC insured. And that aligns with so many families using this for daily expenses, like everyday needs, basic living expenses, food, clothing, housing, heat, water, like the whole expense side, legal fees and education, transportation. And it's a great opportunity that is just helping a lot of families. And it's a great product that's been growing. And from that perspective, there's a lot of opportunities to continue that growth.
Definitely, definitely. And with the money market aspect of it, I've been really impressed as inflation has risen. We've seen yields on high yield savings accounts go up, but we've also seen them go up with Able accounts. And so that's been a really encouraging thing to see, is that they haven't been left out of that equation.
Agreed. I'll date myself a little bit, but it was, when I first opened up my account, it was 4.5% on a money market, and it dipped all the way down to zero for a long time. And it's nice to get something for emergency fund that is sitting there and for the daily expenses that are available for Able accounts as well. So it's a great topic. It's a great opportunity. As we're recording in middle of April 2023, I have a general sense in terms of just hitting the hot button topics of the day. With inflation where it is peaking right now. But as we compare different timeframes, I do think that year-over-year inflation numbers will start to tick down. I know that there was a temporary increase. Hopefully it'll slow down, because after paying for gas and food this week, it's not to belittle the topic of the day, but yeah, it's definitely hitting on, for many families. And that's why it's great that for Able accounts, that these are accounts that can be used for basic living expenses. And of course, if anything, Able accounts are needed now more than ever with the increasing cost of living, which does include food and clothing and housing and all the different, day-to-day expenses. That's a great point. I never really thought about that, Joyce and Bren. As inflation picks up, so does the need for an Able account.
Absolutely. It would be so nice to see some price stabilization sometime soon.
I just wonder when 529 accounts will start to accept eggs as deposits. We all talk about the cost of eggs, and it's like it's like people are posting photos of a picture of 4 egg cartons, and like that you could buy a car with that. It's like it is kind of interesting.
Yeah, maybe inflation will lead us back to a barter society. Who knows? You covered so much. There were a couple things that I wanted to go back and ask about. I know with the able to work provision, that's something that is set to expire in 2025. And there was another thing in there that was also set to expire. So if somebody is concerned about that, maybe you're concerned in the here and now. Maybe you're concerned for when your child reaches adulthood and could really use that able to work provision. That's something that you would reach out to your federal legislators to just let them know. Is there any Senate bill or House bill that you could ask your legislators to support? Or is that still in the works and just let them know, I want more able to work, like make that permanent?
That's a good point. I think for able to work and the rollover provision from 529 to able, the request would be to ask your federal legislators, the senators and the House at the federal level, to add those two components, to a bill. There's all these different initiatives, but if there's no vehicle to pass the initiative, then it won't pass, right? So to the extent that you express your interests, in having the rollover provision from 529 to able extended or made permanent, and able to work made permanent, they collect the information, and from there they know the interest of their voter base and their constituents, and then they'll add it into the bill. That is the mechanics of that. But you're right. So right now there's not a bill number. It makes it a little bit easier when you could say House bill or Senate bill XYZ. I supported this, and it's a little bit easier to discuss. But right now there's not one, and so the call to action would be to call your federal legislators for action. At the state level, circling back to the Medicare clawback provisions, you can also call your state representatives to have that pass at the state level, as did Oregon and several other states. So depending on the types of initiatives that you're looking at and focused on, then you can call your federal level, you can call your state level, help champion the things that are important to yourself and bring it to your attention. As a quick side story, friend Joyce, when I was in New Hampshire, very often I would go to the federal legislators to discuss and even present ABLE when ABLE was before passage of ABLE, and you can meet with them either in DC or in your own state. We'll write down your name, your contact information, and basically voice your items of concern or items that you want to raise, and all that information gets compiled on a weekly basis and is presented up to the team and discussed. And because they are there to represent you, they do listen. So it's an important function of society today.
Definitely. And I feel like we live in such a politically charged environment right now that some of you might have representatives that you feel like they never listen to me on anything. I know I felt that way with some of my federal representatives at one point over the past several years. And one thing that I think is cool about ABLE is that no matter how politically radical your representative might be, this does seem to be a bipartisan issue. So even if you think they won't listen to you on other matters that are important to you, I would just encourage people to reach out about ABLE, because I know on the Able Age Adjustment Act, when it was passed, but even beforehand, when it was trying to gain momentum, Paul, I would check your newsletter and just see like, okay, who signed on? And it really was remarkable how people from both sides of the aisle, no matter what their political ideologies were, they were able to eventually rally around this issue. So just if you feel unheard, maybe this is one issue you don't have to worry about that as much with.
Agreed. For ABLE, I don't have the specific number of votes, but there was over 400 people who voted for the passage of ABLE, and then ultimately everyone did. But it was supported by and large. 95% of at the federal level supported the bill, and because of that support, that it's a well-known piece of legislation, like at the federal and the state level. And you're absolutely right. I do think it's important to be involved. Like the phone calls are great, but to the extent that like one does go visit the local offices to meet with the representative to voice their concern, they will write it down. There's many different organizations that go to Washington DC, and you can meet with them there as well. As one kind of interesting story, when I did live in New Hampshire, I went to Washington DC, and the chief of staff did not live in New Hampshire and never visited. And I reminded him very sternly that I was from there. I was a voter there. And after the meeting, I would be going back to the state. The person needs to represent the people of the state. So it is a reminder at a minimum that those that are there, need to represent the people and support all the voters of the states. Right, that the political environment is just a very interesting time, but it's a great time to communicate with your state and federal representatives on these issues on a continuous basis. So, and there's a number of ways to communicate, whether it's email, whether it's phone call. I find it's always interesting to meet with them in person in either the state capitol or the regional office, or in Washington, D.C., because you can see their perspective as well. As you discussed, there's many different topics that get brought to the legislative table, but ABLE is one that is strongly supported on both sides of the aisle. It is a critical topic, and especially for the users of ABLE, it is supported by pretty much both sides of the aisle across the whole nation. So it's an important topic. Never feel that your voice is unimportant. I always feel open and free to actually make the step, make the call, because it's an important step of the whole process to be heard.
I feel bad because I feel like that's like such a perfect place to end it. But I do want to ask one more question kind of out of left field. You had mentioned ABLE accounts and spousal beneficiaries. It's a really interesting idea. One thing that we haven't talked about on the show is marriage inequality for disabled people. And my understanding of that is that SSI requirements essentially make it financially impossible for a lot of people to get married and continue to receive the services and benefits they need to live a healthy life if they are on SSI. Sometimes that can happen if one partner is disabled. Sometimes I think the issue compounds if both partners are disabled. It seems like this concept of creating new rules for married individuals or creating new rollover allowances may help address that issue a little bit. That was just something that was really interesting whenever you were talking about it.
I think the question of part of the broader context of ABLE launched, it's growing and it's successful to date, but there's a number of instances where it's important to improve the product, whether it be legislation or product or marketing or just like the distribution of ABLE accounts overall. And some of the very simple steps to make ABLE better and to help more families and to make it more user friendly, one would think would be a very simple tweak or change. But then of course, sometimes when you get 20 lawyers and 20 accountants in a room and they're just thinking through a lot of different scenarios, it just makes things more complicated. I do think that there's great opportunity to improve flexibility of ABLE accounts, whether it be a married couple to change the account owners, because you're absolutely right, where some very simple changes in accounting or legal type of paperwork does make it very hard for families to do very basic things like being married. And of course, the structure of the accounting and laws and, that type of, piece, does in certain disappointing instances does, have a paperwork divorce, which is always saddening just to have to go through that process to stand on federal benefits. There are definitely different scenarios where you can keep families together by adding more flexibility to the ABLE accounts and helping the structure overall. So it is an area where we are where we are in there. By and large, the ABLE industry is improving, and I do think it's a great example of just really championing your perspective. For example, calling an ABLE administrator can collect information and raise it up the hill. Alternatively, speaking with the state and federal legislators, in terms of these examples, are a great way to just improve the product overall. Two very interesting kind of points when I did go to Washington, D.C., talk to senators and House. There's two things that they're really looking for, in terms of just like helping to raise awareness and understanding. One is market data and different data, and that's where I come in, where they're looking for an independent third party to share data. And the second piece, critical piece, is stories. Just having a story to explain to them why that flexibility from the account owner to the spouse or the scenario where basically when had to, divorce just to get the benefits. Those stories up in DC are critical and are able to really, change the storyboards and inform the storyboards and show the importance of why legislation can be improved and should be improved, for not just them, but all the people across the state and across the U.S. So it's a great question. I'm not sure if I answered it correctly in a straightforward way, but that's how I would approach the topic.
No, definitely, definitely. And there's no way, I don't think we could address that entire thing. Like we could do a whole episode on that alone. But that is really, really interesting. Thank you. Now, let's say somebody did have one of those stories and they're like, I want to participate. I want to help change things for the better. I'm calling my senators, I'm calling my Congress people, my House representatives, but I have this story that I want to share. I guess, what is the infrastructure that people could engage in to kind of help you guys as you go to the Hill to make those positive changes? Would it be reaching out to program directors at the state level? I know they all work very closely with the National Association of State Treasurers, which does a lot of advocacy work in this space. But I guess if somebody does have that story and wants to get a little bit more involved beyond phone calls, how would they find you, Paul? Or how would they find someone at the state level so that they could enact those changes at the state legislative level?
I think a good starting point is to write a one-page letter, just really summarizing the situation storyboard and make it fairly easy to read, easy to communicate. A lot of it is just sharing the story, whether it be online, on podcasts, at the ABLE administrators, like in your state, program managers. By and large, almost every state has an ABLE program. So that's one starting point for sharing the story. I think the next level is at the state level, the state congressional members. And then also, depending on the scenario, your own school system, and then the federal legislators as well. In many cases, there's a type of subject that really isn't being covered across different departments, depending on the state. Some states have good education departments that really has an infrastructure that can help in different scenarios or different state structures that can help. But many times, in many ways, the topic either gets bubbled up to that state legislation or the federal level as well. But I do think that a very simple storyboard would be to write down the one page, just so you kind of have some story that can be shared. And then from there, just scheduling a call or a meeting with your legislators. For the senator at the federal Senate level, it's pretty easy to find, who they are, and then they'll have Washington, D.C. offices on their website, and they have a phone number right there, setting up a in-person meeting or a call to sort of explain that story is one place to put. The other one is just submitting online, and that's another place. And by and large, it's also the local newspapers. Once you have it written, it could be another spot to just raise awareness of the topic of the storyboard. And I do think there's a lot of self-championing within the ABLE space, especially for the demographic. So I do think for finding more information, broadly speaking, if the question was where can someone get more information, I do think that there's the IRS publication like 907 is a great place for federal legislation. At the state level, there's the ABLE plan disclosures. I think for more information, there's also your different representatives at the federal and state level. And from there, it's there's a number of places to get more information, whether it be estate planners or lawyers or accountants, and also within your community as well.
Thank you so much to Paul, both for joining us today and for being so supportive of our efforts here on the podcast. He's been one of our biggest allies and is a great person to follow for ways to improve the financial futures of disability families. If you are not already subscribed to his newsletter, please make sure you do so today, especially today. You'll find it linked in the show notes. Now, Joyce and I have a fairly big announcement. Just like all of you, our lives have been turned upside down the past few years, on top of dealing with systems that are somehow even less friendly to our families than prior to the pandemic, which is a huge reason we started the podcast in the first place. We do also each run our own businesses, which existed before 2020. It's actually how we met each other. We're coworkers. As we try to juggle it all, we've had to be real with ourselves in recent months. This season was originally meant to go live in fall 2022, but obviously we didn't actually get it up and live until this spring. We don't want to keep putting you through those delays. Because we can't deliver as frequently as we'd like to, we're going to be putting the podcast on a hiatus for now. That's not to say we won't do anything with it again ever in the future, but for right now, Mom Autism Money is on an indefinite break. In our absence, we'd like to refer you all to all of our amazing guests. While you can obviously find them in our archives, they also produce great resources out in the community. Follow them, engage with their work, stay informed, and keep getting educated. Thank you to each and every one of them for making the show as great as it was. Like I said, Joyce and I do each run our own businesses, which will absolutely be active in the coming months and years. Joyce runs an amazing site called My Stay at Home Adventures. You can check it out at mystayathomeadventures.com and follow on all the social media. She's got budget-friendly recipes, free resources like budgeting templates, and overall frugal living and parenting posts thrown in the mix. Again, that's mystayathomeadventures.com. On my end, many of you have read the Feminist Financial Handbook. If you haven't yet, I'll leave a link to it in the show notes. Joyce is actually one of the women featured in the book, so you'll still get both of us at once. If you read it or have read this book in the past and genuinely liked it, leaving a 5-star review on Amazon or Goodreads is one of the best ways you can support any author. The bulk of my work the past several years has been freelance writing, which you can find floating all over the internet, but my main site is femfrugality.com. Whether you're visiting My Stay at Home Adventures or Femfrugality, we hope you will all stay in touch. We're still here, even if we have to put this particular platform on pause for the time being. Thank you so much for tuning in every week and making this experience the wonderful ride that it was. And don't forget to subscribe to Paul's newsletter to stay informed on ABLE accounts and other specific legislative issues that affect your family's finances. We love you all. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.